Hello, everybody. Welcome to Spiritual Talk. This is Rain Patton, and today we're going to talk about spiritual protection, about her book, How to Survive the Occult, and as well as healing. And as a medicine woman, we would like to know more. So, Rain, to start, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Oh, wow. Okay, so about myself, I am originally from Portland, Oregon, which is the West Coast, and I guess they call it sensitive. I think nowadays they call it being born woke. But when I was a child, I used to, and many people do, they see spirits or they have imaginary friends. So I never really had like the little, like you hear people talk about like the living teddy bear or stuff like that. I never really had that, but I had more like people of indigenous cultures coming to me when I was a child, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I talk about this in my book, Surviving the Cult: Abuse Within the African Diaspora. And also, ironically enough, there were a lot of toys back in my day that I believe in, even to now, was given by the government to help create people's parallel reality. So, like, there was these this spin wheel, and you would get on it and you spin around, and it would actually help you induce into an altered state of consciousness.
Oh, yeah.
There was definitely those kind of things. And then as I got older and I started to learn more about the conjure work, hoodoo, those spiritual practices, I started to learn that those are actually tools that are designed to help you go into other dimensions and parallel realities.
That's correct.
That's like my very beginning intro. But as myself, I'm a spiritualist. I do more healing work.
That's wonderful. And you say, how old were you when you started this your spiritual practice?
So when I was around 5 or 6, I was doing a lot of astral projection.
And 5 or 6?
Yeah. So
look at me. I'm 32. I'm sitting there like, I'm just trying to do astral projection,
Well, we'll actually talk a little bit about how to make that journey a little bit easier. But yeah, I was around 5 or 6. I was doing some astral projection then, but I didn't know what it was called. It was just normal. And I was doing a lot of healing work back then. Again, I just thought it was normal. Like there would be, I remember one particular situation where there was this bird that had fallen into the stream by our house. And I went and I got the bird out the water and I held the bird in my hands. And then a couple minutes later, the bird came back. And so I would also do this with like insects and things like that. It wasn't until I got older and told my parents about it that I realized that that's not quote unquote normal. But to answer your question, my healing work began back when I was a child.
You're gifted. You're gifted for sure. That's amazing.
To venture overseas to learn about the shamanic anthropological aspect of the culture. And my journey landed me on the East Coast, where I am now. And that's kind of where this story kind of really begins.
Amazing. So how did you get involved with the African Cult group?
So I actually was on, and I don't know if it's even still up anymore, but it was a site called meetup.com. I was actually living in New York City at the time, and I was running my bed and breakfast. I had my own business, and I was in the process of purchasing a building. But I wanted to, get a second opinion, see what the spirit world said. And of course, I could always do my own readings, but I wanted to have like an outside source. So I went on to meetup.com. I found a lady who said that she was a voodoo priest, but that she was a practitioner predominantly of what's called Lukumi and Santeria. Now, I'm not sure if everyone who's watching your station are familiar with those diasporas or traditions, but
I don't think
Santeria.
so. I'm not aware of it as well.
No? Oh,
No.
okay. All right. So,
Maybe they do because there's so many different people who watch the channel. So, but you could explain it to us, and we get a deeper understanding of it.
absolutely. So, I didn't even know either. Like, I was totally green. So, I had heard of voodoo, right? Like, who hasn't heard of voodoo?
Yeah.
But, and like, I think television kind of gets us scared a little bit of voodoo. So when she said that she was a voodoo priest, but then she also practiced these other ones, I was like, okay, well, that's a little less quote unquote threatening to me because I don't know what those are. And Santeria is basically so what happened is during the slave trade, there was a group of Africans who went over to Cuba, and it's basically a practice of African Indio from Cuba, Catholicism, and a little sprinkle of this and sprinkle of that. Then that makes Santeria, really. And then basically what happened is that Santeria started to kind of get not the best name. And so there was like a revamp of, and they call it now Lukumi.
Okay.
Now, a lot of people who practice Lukumi don't really quite realize that it's actually just a revamp of Santeria. I didn't know. I didn't even realize, and I was in it for like a couple years, and then I realized, well, like, oh, this is Santeria.
So, what is a Santeria? It's basically a voodoo practice that is created in Mexico. Or how would you explain that?
Okay, so the best way to explain Santeria is that it is very similar to voodoo. And I've also, I have to add here that because I came into these practices, I have a very less biased opinion about voodoo. Like, from what I've been able to notice is that voodoo is actually a really, really cool practice. It's not what I practice, but I have a lot of respect for it. Santeria is like voodoo, similar, but it has a lot more stuff mixed inside. Like it's okay. We're gonna say figuratively that it's voodoo, but it landed in Cuba. And so you have like Catholicism involved. You have the Indios of Cuba that involved. Then you even have what's called Palo involved. It's like a mixing pot. There's even some other practices that's involved that are not that great.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to badmouth it, so I'm going to leave it like that.
What are some of the practice? What are some of the well, of course not. We're going to try to keep this very spiritual, very clean, as to what we're here preaching is spiritual, of course.
Yes.
So, what are some of the practice that you took away from the occult that you can still use in your everyday life?
Oh. There is a strong emphasis on herbs, and working with the plants is definitely something that I was very much involved in when I was doing Southern Conjure. And for those who are not familiar with Southern Conjure is like folk magic for African. What the slaves were using for their own protection. Some people call it, and depending on what region you're in. So some people call it hoodoo, and it's a little different than hoodoo. Like hoodoo deals with more like, it's just the region. Southern Conjure and hoodoo are very similar. Okay. And those are two practices that deal with earth magic, if that's the term that you're familiar with.
Like the earth, Mother Earth?
Yes. So herbs, plants, dirt, sometimes even bones. So like you hear people talking about, have you ever heard the term throwing chicken bones before?
No. Well, I see people breaking a chicken bone, but I haven't seen people What do you mean throwing it?
Okay, so in Southern Conjure / Hoodoo, there's it's called throwing chicken bones. It's very similar to people reading tarot cards,
Mm-hmm.
but instead of like they didn't have tarot cards during slavery, right?
Of course.
So
Who's gonna make them?
so they would actually use chicken bones, similar to ruin. So if you're familiar with Celtic magic, they use a lot of they'll take stones or pieces of wood, and they'll draw like certain symbols on them, and they'll do readings that way by casting. That's the Druid way, and it's very similar with throwing bones. They use chicken bones. Sometimes they'll use a combination of like possum bones, chicken bones, whatever was available during that time in order to tell the future.
So, how did you know you were in a wrong occult? Like, how did you know the practice was not aligned with you? Did you just sense it, or something happened? There must have been.
So yeah, I actually was really like I love Southern Conjure. I love Hoodoo. Like that has always been my bread and butter, and it was easy. Like sometimes I didn't even realize I was doing it. Like it would just be I'd walk in nature and I would see like a little fairy and be like, oh, pick this flower, put it on under your tongue, So it was just like, oh, okay. It was never like magic. It was just nature, And so when I came into Santeria Lukumi, I noticed that everything seemed to be very fear-based, And for me, I never felt that anything that's evolved around fear is something I wanted to really deal with. And then there started to be points where, like, I'm a type of spiritualist who I used to see spirits very clearly. And when I came into the practice, the spirits when I say the practice, I mean like Santeria and Lukumi. The spirits that I would start to see, they just seemed so sad and depressed, and like it was just like the vibration was
so
lower.
Yes.
Lower, yeah.
And you take spirit. What is the image? If you were to describe a spirit, how would you describe it? Is it like a light? Is it like a shadow? What is it?
Oh, that's a good question. So, really, it's everyone's different. So just because I may see spirit one way doesn't mean that everyone's going to see it the same way. Okay. I used to see spirit like you. Like I would just see a person, and I wouldn't realize that it wasn't a. Only reason why I know it wasn't a person is that because they wouldn't speak, and I used to see them. Now I see outlines of people, and I see spears of light, and then I also see elementals. And all elementals, nature spirits. Are you familiar with that term? Elementals and nature spirits? Okay. So
I am, but not elemental one. No.
It's the same. It's the same thing. There's just archetypes. But we're going to use the term elementals. Or no, we're going to use the term nature spirit because that's more universal, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So nature spirits are like the trees, the water, the elements, right? Hence the elementals. And those can come over like, they can actually take physical form. So those are pretty cool to watch if you're actually in nature, like in a forest, and you want to talk to like the forest, like one of the forest spirits, then they'll actually take like a physical form sometimes.
How do they take a physical form? Do they, whatever object there is around, they could just slide in it and just start moving?
Yeah, so nature spirits, like, for example, if you're like in the by a tree, and you'll like, okay, so this is a way that I encourage like my students to see nature spirits. If you look at a tree and you do the right kind of offering or communication with the tree, they'll actually use the branches, leaves, and the wind around to form like a face in the tree, and in the shrub of the tree.
Cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But it's cool. Like I just start seeing. Well, I'm just eager to see spirit to communicate with them, but I am not anywhere close to it yet. So
Oh
I
no,
just
yeah,
like.
you're there. Everyone is there, dude. Like, and that's the reason why people have issues like seeing it, because they believe that they can't. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I have to be able to do this, that, and the other before I can see it. But if the thing is if you're familiar with are you familiar with dimensions a little bit? Like,
Yes, I know really well about the different dimensions. Yeah.
Okay, so the reality of it is that everything is in here and now.
Yeah.
Time and space is kind of like a group belief of lies, right? Because there really isn't any time, right? So
yeah.
everything is here and now.
Huh? Yeah. Time doesn't exist only on Earth.
Right, exactly. And it's really only linear. And the only reason why it's linear is because we've like you remember the old movies back in the day where there were like projections and it like be one clip after the other. So it's like a moment in time, and strung along creates linear time. So if you look at it like that, it makes it a lot easier to realize that you can actually communicate with spirit right now, because it's happening right now.
That's true. Possible. The way I look at it for me now is that when I see a repeated number, I think angels are communicating with me. Maybe you call it spirit, but I think angels is directing me to right directions to where I need to go usually. And this is my way of communicating with spiritual beings by using different numbers.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know how we all have like spirit guides and ancestors and those who passed on. If you really think about it, we're really in like a like it's all numbers. It's all like
it's like
a the binary system. It's all just a really big computer, right?
We like living in the matrix, the actual one.
Yeah. And so when you have like these what do they call it? Like what you're saying about the numbers, it's really just symmetry. Like when things, not by coincidence, like what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it.
Symmetrical? Are you talking about symmetrical?
No, it's close to that. But basically what it is that so the spirit realm, a lot of times they don't just always talk to you. They'll communicate with you by patterns, right? And so if you're on the right track, you may see 1111. Or you're about to run into something that's not in your best interest, you'll get 666. You know, stuff like that. It's just the matrix or the system showing you the patterns of what's going on. That's how some spirits actually communicate with you, literally, like through the binary system, through the matrix.
That's amazing. I guess I've been communicating with them, but I just didn't realize that so much.
Yeah.
Do you get to call on the spirit, or they just show up?
Say again?
Do you get to call on which spirit you want to talk to, or they just show up and they just want to talk to you?
It depends on how I'm communicating with the spirit. So, like I said, I do a lot with plants, and so there's certain plants that I will work with, and I know what kind of energy or spirit or dimension. Because think about it now, when we talk about talking to the spirit, a lot of time we talk about ancestors, right? But now remember, if ancestors are all here and now, they're really just in another dimension, you know? Yeah.
Very true.
Right. So
it just means that we are we're living parallel with the spirit. they're just in the metaphysic world that we don't see with our naked eye, but they're literally always beside us.
Exactly, exactly. And you know how the human eye only sees like 1% of what's really there, right?
Yeah,
There's so much around us that we don't normally see every day that's
that is true
there.
too. Yeah.
It's always there. Like
Mhm.
we've been programmed since we were children to denounce what we our truth, right? I mean, even look at
Mhm.
religion, like not to knock religion, but we're taught to look outside of ourselves for the answer. You know, that
This case is look within.
right, like the answers are within us. It's in our DNA. We're programmed with all the answers inside of us. It's just that
Mhm.
we've been taught and we've been programmed by outside sources, the media, religion, our family, our friends, society, to
Mhm.
not look within but to look outside for all the
Mhm.
answers.
Mhm.
And so that's why, like, you know, that was something you saw, but you're told, but you want to convince yourself, as we all do, that it's not fair because it's not politically correct to see
Mhm.
this shadow, and then, oh my god, what's a shadow, you know? And that gets kind of scary to some people, but then you realize it's just a shadow self. And
Right. Wow. Okay. So, what were you looking for when you joined the occult group? Like, were you looking for experience or just an extension of more knowledge or like a mentor? What were you looking for?
you know, it's I was looking for myself. You know, it's like,
Always.
right, and
We
it's like
always
I was
looking
here
for
the whole
one.
time.
This is.
I mean, but for me, I when I look back at it now, I'm like, wow. Like I traveled all across the world to find what was
Mm.
right there the whole time.
So, as a medicine woman, what type of practice do you usually do to heal someone or help people when they come to you?
So I'm big on holding space. And so what you do with holding space is that you're actually, it's not so much that you're curing the person or that you're actually um, fixing the person, is that you're holding a vibration in order for them to heal themselves if they so choose to. And so I
Mhm.
do a lot of holding space for people, which could be perceived as energy healing.
Mhm.
I also am really big on knowledge, so I try to educate people from my personal experience in order for them to take back their power.
Mhm.
And with knowledge is power, you know. And I find that a lot of the systematic issues that people are having, whether it's health or spiritual, is from a
Mhm.
lack of understanding how the spiritual world really works.
Mhm.
And then I also work with nature, you know, because we are nature and we sometimes
Mhm.
forget this.
Yes.
So, yeah, so, you know, showing people how to communicate with the babbling brook and the whispering wind and, you know, just things like that. Um,
Mhm.
I do a lot of vision quests with people. Um, and I, you know, right now, what's been really big is like ayahuasca, and I love ayahuasca. I definitely use ayahuasca. But there's so
Ayahuasca.
many. Huh?
So tell me about ayahuasca now. The
Ayahuasca.
practice, it sounds so incredible because I've known a lot of people who went to ayahuasca ceremony or retreats and they have healed their depression or anxiety or any sort of like trauma they're experiencing, and it usually happens suddenly. Now, maybe there's a magic behind it that I don't know. I'm really afraid to try it because all the different side effects that people are telling me about is like you get to throw up, do this, and your stomach, this, you know what I mean? So,
Like a night of binge drinking. Uh, yeah, I mean, you know, it's a means to an end when you're dealing with plant medicine, because the idea isn't to continuously take it. The idea is to get you aware of that state so that you can go there without the medicine. Um, And that's also why you do certain rituals beforehand in order to make the purging process a lot easier. And it can be a little intense,
And
but
you do ayahuasca ceremony in the U.S. or just when you go for a retreat?
So it, because I gotta be careful, right? I do stay in the U.S. But it's not just ayahuasca that I deal with it either, because it seems like right now ayahuasca has gotten a lot of publicity, and ayahuasca is amazing. Like I am very supportive of ayahuasca. There's also other plants though. I deal with a lot of obviously Peruvian, so ayahuasca and a little DMT and things like that. I'm a little bit more selective when I do with the DMT, just simply because it can be a little overwhelming, and people aren't really ready to go there. But there's also like African dream root. There's different the people from Susak, the African tribe. Like there's lots of actually other plants. In Australia has some. So there's lots. I deal with a lot of different medicines.
Out of all the medicine for healing and for energy boosting, which one is your to go for, like your favorite out of all that you like to use continuity?
For energy, you said?
Yeah, for energy boosting or trauma healing, for example.
Well, you know what? I do it case by case. I understand that nowadays it seems like everybody wants to like the cure all, but like there was one person who just needed to have like a nice glass of wheatgrass, and it just flushed them out. They didn't have any more health issues. I'm big on wheatgrass. Do people even do wheatgrass anymore? I don't know. I haven't even heard anybody do it anymore.
I got no idea. When you say grass, you talking about cannabis? No.
Okay, so I don't normally do,
like an actual grass?
Yeah, like wheatgrass. Like, okay, so wheatgrass is it's actually a very potent grass, and you put it in a juicer, and it's legal, and you drink it, and it literally like resets your immune system. Like, it's the best thing.
Can you send me the link, please? Because I think you might need it.
I keep forgetting that you're in Canada. So sometimes, like, what's well known in America may not be that well known in another country, like Canada or Europe or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So, what type of sickness and what type of sickness can you heal as a medicine woman?
So again, I don't like to say that I heal. I hold space. So I give people the opportunity to heal themselves. And with that, you can cure cancers. You can cure prostate cancer. You can cure breast cancer, eczema. But usually with eczema, like things like that, I also use herbs as well, but it's there. You can pretty much cure anything,
Wonderful. So we're going to jump into protection, spiritual protection. I know it's really big in the spiritual community. A lot of people are getting energy. They're dealing with a lot of dark energy, for example, or they're experiencing a lot of tension on the body, and they're not sure what exactly is bothering them. How can someone, let's say, if I'm newly in the spiritual community and still discovering my roots, what is the best way to protect myself?
Okay. So most people are not going to like my answer. But to be honest, we all create our reality to a certain extent. And so I always caution people to use the word protection very loosely, because if you become overly concerned with protection, you're actually inviting an attack, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So the way that I've always done it, and the way that I've always I believe in energy passing through, because everything is energy, but we assign the negative or the positive to it, right? And so I like to think of it not so much as protecting myself, but for allowing my vibration to be so high that denser negative energy just flows right through me. So it's a type of protection, but it's not like you're like, oh my God, okay, you know, it's totally different, because you're just being one with the nature. You're just being one with the energy. You're just letting it flow through you. You know, your vibration is that high. So, yeah.
Like, I know some people use music for sound healing to bring that high vibration balance in the body as well. Do you use any sound music and stuff like that for healing as well?
Yes, but you know what? You can do this type of, I'm trying to think of another word other than protection. Vibrational healing, I guess. By submerging your body in water, because remember, we are water, right? We're like 90 something percent water. And then if you take a nice thin piece of crystal, and you bang that, and you let that vibration ripple through the water, you can actually reset and recalibrate your entire system.
So what do you do with the crystal? You just take it and throw it inside the water?
So you would get in the water, like in a tub or something. You would take a nice thin piece of crystal, and you would get it to vibrate somehow, like maybe with a stone, or you can maybe even use a tuning fork. That might be a little too powerful, but if you really want to feel something, try like a Resident 528 tuning fork, and put that in the water with you, and let that vibrate through you. You know, let the vibrations go through the water and go through you. I would personally, that's like a more aggressive version, but I would personally just use like a crystal, like a clear quartz crystal, and get it to vibrate somehow. Could hit it with a stone or some way, and let that vibration go through you that way, and that will reset you.
Cool. Why do you think we need protection upon ourselves, right? Why do you think sometimes we feel like we need protection as a spiritual beings?
Because we're programmed to fear what we don't understand. You know, and even for myself, it took me years to get to this point, because I was like, you know, I mean, I literally had that cult that I escaped from in my book, Surviving the Cult: Abuse Within the African Diaspora. They were literally trying to murder me, and I was pissed. I was like, I didn't do anything to people. They just want me out of the picture because I'm seeing what's going on. And I was pissed. But then I had to realize that it would not be happening if the universe would not be putting me through something I cannot handle. Right?
Okay, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. So obviously, if I'm going through this, I'm able to handle it. And two, we're all here in order to help each other. So maybe by me going through this, I'm going through this in order to help someone not go through it, or help someone through it. So by me not wanting to go through what I obviously agreed to do in the first place, or I wouldn't be going through it, energy, it's selfish of me to not want to continue the path, because I can help someone through my path. So...
Right. And you feel that you have learned a lot from being a part of the group, correct?
I learned a lot. I learned how to, I didn't learn very much from them, but I learned a lot when I left. I learned how to avoid evil. I learned how to let evil pass through me. I learned how to identify dark spirits, or spirits that are not what I prefer. I learned to trust myself. I learned how to go within. I mean, wow, like I am like such a better spiritualist now than I ever, and I was like, everybody's like, do you hate her for like trying to kill your family? You got to read the book. And I'm like, no, because you know what? I am one badass spiritualist now.
About your book, it's such an intriguing story to learn. So about your book, tell us a little bit about it and how you think this book could help someone survive a cult group that will try to get them to join, because there's so many influence right now, especially in the spiritual community with the Great Awakening. There's a whole type of different distractions. Obviously, you don't know which one is right for you. How can you spot the right spiritual practice from the wrong occult group that interfering with your development?
Okay, so that's a good question. What I'm going to say is that I can't really say what's right or wrong because everyone has their own spiritual journey. There have been fundamental things that I know has accelerated my development. And for those, a couple of those things would be, one, not giving away my power. So if you find yourself dealing with a group of people who want you to turn your power over to someone else or something else, I would use caution. If you find that you're becoming belittled or someone's talking down to you, or when you walk away you don't feel empowered, or you feel funny, or you are feeling sad, use caution. Yeah, those are like the three ones: fear, intimidation, and powerlessness. I would definitely, and they come very subtle. Like they'll be like, oh, we're peace, love, and light. But then you find that you have to bow down to this thing. And, if you're on your period, then you can't bow down and it'll eat you. Like, I remember they were telling me stuff like that. Like, what? What is this? Or it was just crazy stuff. Like, there was one point where I was engaged, and I was showing the cult leader, the Madrina, my wedding ring. And she was like, you can't have that ring because it looks kind of like mine. Tell your boyfriend to take it back and get a different one. And I looked around at everybody else, and they're like, and I'm like, what the hell?
I hope you didn't take it back.
Huh?
I hope you didn't take it back just because you said it.
I did. We actually ended up not getting married. She said he was trying to tell me, he was like, Rain, there's something very wrong about this group. And I was like, no, she's talking to, cults. She's talking to God. And, because they deal with something called orishas. And orishas also, like in voodoo, and they call them lawaz. But orishas, now it depends on who you're talking to. And that's another thing. If you don't know, number 4, watch out for it. If you can't get a clear answer with what you're dealing with, then you use caution. So when I first started to learn about Orisha, I was told that they're nature spirits. I'm like, okay, cool, nature spirits. I deal with nature spirits all the time. But then you hear some people say, oh, they're like angels. And I'm like, wait a minute, well, angels and nature spirits, those are totally different kind of vibrations. Those are different dimensions, And so I would ask questions, and they'd be like, oh, just be quiet, And then some people would say that they're dead ancestors. And I'm like, well, a dead person and a nature spirit, that's like totally different. And then people would say that they're, what was the fourth one I heard? The one that they used to tell me why I should give up my ring was that they're aspects of God. It's like if you look at God as a sun, then Orishas are the rays of sun. So if I'm speaking on behalf of the Orisha, I'm speaking on behalf of God, and you have to do what I tell you to do. And see, they're also dealing with witchcraft here. So you have they do abodes, and you have to be careful that the people that you're dealing with aren't doing abodes on you. Abodes are witchcraft. It's just a different term. It's an African term for witchcraft.
Right.
And that's what was happening in this cult. They call them lay, but they were witchcrafting the participants so that they couldn't really think for themselves, and they would just kind of be like drones.
Oh, so they're more easy to control that way and just like followers instead of actually having a voice and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there was one point where I was seeing fractures in my aura.
Mm-hmm.
They were ripping spirits out of my spiritual frame so that they'd be able to control me easier. But I didn't know. I just saw these rips, and I'd ask them what it is, and they'd just be like, be quiet, shut up. You know?
How did you find the rips?
I go into meditation, or I go in to do a vision quest, and I would see these fractures and these rips in my aura, or my meridian. Same thing, right? My meridian field. And I didn't know what was going on, you know, because you're told that if you question, that means you lack faith. So you're encouraged not to question. It's just like, it's like Catholicism times 20.
Not too much. I think when people leave religions, they don't like the controlling thing. They want to be free spirit. That's what spiritual is all about. Discovering the metaphysical without being controlled. So that brings me to our next question. Where can we find your book?
Oh, so it is on Amazon. I'll send you a link, or I'll post a link in this chat or in this video. Mm-hmm. But it's on Amazon, and if you type in "Surviving the Occult: Abuse Within the African Diaspora," mm-hmm. It's available on ebook, Kindle, as well as paperback.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, so now you guys know where you find the book. Go get yourself one, and it's going to be amazing. It will change your life. It will teach you a lot about spiritual practice and how to protect yourself and how to live and survive. So who is God to you?
Oh, okay. So my perception of God is a little different than most. Because sometimes when I say God, people think of the biblical aspect of God, like this all-powerful entity or force that's outside of us. One of the things that Spirit had me do my own research on was Sumeria, which is the original people, like the first human civilization.
And Atlantis?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, a little bit further back than Atlantis, but around the same era. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And so I do realize that the concept that we have today of God is really more of an Anunnaki's influence of lording over the people. So like if the Anunnaki hadn't have like started to program us and mess with us and all that kind of crap, we wouldn't really have religion like we do, right? So when people say who is God, it's not the God that we've been programmed to believe or that we've been influenced to believe. We're all fractures. We're all part of consciousness of God. That's God. God is this is light, and we're all fractures. We're all part of God. We're God. I'm God. You're God. That is how we're. But that's kind of goes back to turning your power over, right? So that's kind of what is a concern for me, is that we are the grand creators. We are actually the gods who forgot they were gods.
Yes.
We create realities in parallel dimensions, but because we've created this time loop, this parallel time thing, we manifest things at different times so that we don't even realize that we are gods. That we are the grand creators, and we limit ourselves. We're like grand limiters of ourselves. But you know, when people talk about instantaneous healing, you know, those are people who are starting to raise into the fifth dimension, who are starting to realize that I'm not giving my power away anymore. God is within me. God is the air, God is the trees, God is nature, God is in the water. We're all just energy
God is within
reflections
you.
of God. Now, if you want to talk about the religious aspect and the true aspect of the religious version of God, that would be the Egyptian, the original pharaohs of Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the ones who created the concept of what we believe today as God.